Have you ever studied for a test?
Did you cry?
Did you even know what you were doing? We all know studying is, frankly, not that much fun. And there's also the stress of spending so much time doing it and not knowing if it's going to work.
Good news! We're going to present some study strategies that will make your study sessions much more beneficial for you and way more fun.
Hi, I'm Dean.
I'm Shayna.
And I'm Hannah.
We'll show you how to space out your studying, and you can even go to Starbucks in between. Then you'll learn how to draw and get creative. Finally, we'll end with the heavy stuff and begin to expand our thinking and learning.
So, let's get into it!
Hi, my name is Dean, and I'm here to speak to you about spacing. In your science classes, have you ever had to completely map out the human body's anatomical structures with their physiological functions? If you have, I'm sure it took you many hours amongst many days prior to prepare for this. If you have, you studied with the spacing strategy. Spacing is a type of study strategy that I'm sure many of you have implemented, maybe without even knowing it. The fundamental idea behind spacing as a learning strategy has to do with building study habits that result in essentially exposing yourself to material multiple times with breaks in between of indeterminate length. Studies show that students that study in this fashion tend to increase the likelihood of highest retention and consequently higher exam scoring. That is a pretty broad overview, but let's dive into this a little deeper. The spacing study strategy's intent is rooted within the metacognitive hypothesis. This hypothesis is theoretically based on another type of studying strategy called the expanding practice method. Basically, it is when a person is initially tested on the material at short lags and then with successive testing waits longer and longer before trying to retrieve the material. Scientists attribute this method to academic success because the initial testing are conducted as mass trials when retrieval is still untried, and then the later repetitive testings are space trials when the item has already been retrieved successfully before. So we all know what cramming is and what that entails, but I'm sure you're thinking, what are space trials and what do they consist of? A research study conducted at Barnard College consisted of seeing how people chose to space their study sessions. 32 psychology students were presented with word pairings and were then observed to mass or space study. They were then tested on the material to observe the frequency of retained information and the study methods that were used to obtain that outcome. The results supported the metacognitive hypothesis and concluded that within the hypothesis, students also tended to rate the material from what they initially viewed as easiest to hardest to retain. The items that were viewed as easier were typically space studied, and the items that were viewed as harder were mass studied. Ultimately, it defended the ideal behind the spacing strategy that academic success can be achieved and level of retention can be enhanced when students' habits were spaced based on the cognitive judgments of the difficulty of the presented material. If you're awful at time management and spacing sounds like the hardest study habit to develop, it doesn't have to be an educational deal breaker. Take 15 minutes to write out your priorities inside and outside of school in order to plan gaps for studying accordingly. If you're like me, having different calendars dedicated specifically to work and another specifically to school really helps me with organization. Maybe you'll find it fun too. As a science major, it can be difficult to find study techniques that fit uniformly into all courses and/or professors' teaching styles. For biological sciences specifically, spacing can be very useful. Say you take any of the courses within these textbooks, no matter how different the content may be, it is extremely helpful to space out your studies for any of them. Spacing helps you learn biological sciences by exposing you to the information multiple times over an extended period of time. Instead of cramming and looking at it all once, you look over it in small intervals throughout multiple days. This act will allow you to retrieve the information from the last time you studied it, helping to better retain the information. As a first-year student, you are in for a ton of changes. Whether that be academic or personal, growth is essential. Take the time now to prioritize each of your responsibilities and get a plan set that you can use to hold yourself accountable when spacing your studies. It'll be much easier than you think. There are other study strategies, even beyond the ones we've mentioned before, but we will jump next into dual coding with Shayna.
Hi, I'm Shayna. In your science classes, have you ever had to draw out a cell or photosynthesis or an energy flow diagram? Then you added words to it just to clarify what you were looking at. If you have, you just dual code it. Dual coding is a type of study strategy that is as simple as drawing a picture and adding explanations to it. This helps provide multiple representations of the same topic. There is something called the dual coding theory. This basically says that humans have two information processing systems, one that represents information visually and one verbally. A research study done by Wams and colleagues looked at memory retention of students after performing different drawing tasks. The researchers found that memory improved when the students were able to perform multiple different versions of drawing, such as free drawing, drawing it blind, imagining it, and writing it. The researchers also found that performing a motor task, such as drawing, is the most beneficial to memory because it requires the task of actually engaging with the task being done. The students spent more time drawing out the item, allowing more focus to be spent on the concept being learned. Basically, repetition is key, and drawing allows you to spend more time on a topic. Both of these will increase your memory of the subject. If you're awful at drawing and dual coding sounds like the worst thing ever, I have good news. It can be more than just drawing and annotating. You can also watch animations or videos that combine both visuals and narration in order to make it more exciting. A study from Meyer and Anderson found that students who viewed an animation while also listening to a narration at the same time did significantly better on a problem-solving test than students who either only watched the animation or only heard the narration, but not both at the same time. Students who did not study anything at all did worse than any other group. So, you know what that means. Dual coding can be especially useful in biology and other science courses because many of the concepts you are learning are too small to visually see. We can't physically see photosynthesis happening, the inside of a cell, or what genes look like on a chromosome. Being able to draw out these processes or concepts help make sense of the tiny chemical reactions and the transfer of energy through a system that we could otherwise never visualize. However, say you just drew a cell. You have a lot of shapes and no context as to what you're actually looking at. This is when annotations come in handy. There, now I understand what I'm seeing. I guarantee you won't only use this in biology classes, but also physics and chemistry as well. Again, we can't see small chemical structures, and chemistry relies on drawing them out in order to answer questions about them. Physics requires drawing a lot of force diagrams, so it doesn't hurt to start practicing dual coding now. Lastly, in addition to both spacing and dual coding, Hannah is going to teach you about elaboration.
Hi, I'm Hannah. In your science classes, have you ever had to memorize a list of things? Let's say, like the name of all the planets. Did you come up with a mnemonic device? When I was younger, we learned, "My very educated mother just served us noodles." Mnemonic devices are techniques a person can use to help them improve their ability to remember something. If you said yes and you came up with a mnemonic device, then you have used elaboration. Elaboration is a type of learning strategy where a student uses elements of what is to be learned and expands on them. The student expands the target information by relating other information to it. Examples like creating a phrase, making an analogy, creating labeling diagrams. Elaboration theory is an instructional design theory that argues that content to be learned should be organized from simple to complex order, while providing a meaningful context in which subsequent ideas can be integrated. There was extensive research done by Joel R. Levin with the University of Wisconsin, where he identified the 10 basic elaboration principles to follow for using elaboration effectively. Principle number 1. Elaborations should be meaningful and compatible with students' prior knowledge. Principle number 2. Elaborations should integrate the to-be associated information. Principle number 3. Elaborations should provide logical connections. Principle number 4. Elaborations should prompt active information processing on the part of the learner. Principle number 5. Elaborations should be vivid. Principle number 6. In certain cases, the more elaboration, the better. Principle number 7. In some cases, it is better for an instructor to provide elaborations than to have the students generate them on their own. Principle number 8. Verbal and pictorial elaborations may not be processed in the same manner, and they do not always yield comparable learning benefits. Principle number 9. Elaborations are beneficial for individuals with diverse characteristics and at all levels of availability. Principle number 10. Elaborations do not benefit all performance outcomes. Time to study. Elaboration can be especially helpful in biology and other science courses because many of the concepts you're learning you can always see, and there's a lot to remember. Coming up with ways to retain and remember all the information you're going to learn is exactly why elaboration exists. Let's take something like the photosynthesis equation. Simple equation, but how does it actually work? Let's elaborate. We're going to focus on the photosynthesis cycle. Let's take this tree, for example. We're going to put the reactants on the left and the products on the right of the tree, just to make it look like our equation. First, we'll have CO2 from the atmosphere entering into the tree. We'll then have H2O absorbed into the roots of the tree. Then on the right side with our products, we'll have oxygen being released and glucose. We just went from a simple equation and provided context to it by drawing out the cycle and relating it to real-life ideas and situations, and hope that you'll have a more elaborate understanding of the equation. Now, take this knowledge to move forward successfully in your college career and go achieve your dreams. I hope you use dual coding, elaboration, and spacing daily in your studies. You're welcome.
Bye!